KCRW in Santa Monica, this is The Treatment.
Welcome to The Treatment. I'm Elvis Mitchell. My guest today is writer-director Todd Solondz, who has so far been with us at almost every movie he's made, from Welcome to the Dollhouse to certainly Happiness to storytelling, and now his newest, Palindromes. Todd, thanks for being here again.
Thank you.
I've got to ask you to do something you've done a number of times for this movie, which is to tell the audience what it's about.
On the simplest, most fundamental level, the story is concerned with a 13-year-old girl who wants to be a mom. She imagines that having a baby will provide her a kind of unconditional love. And so ultimately she sets out on this quest to achieve this. And it becomes not just a quest for this kind of love, but really ultimately a kind of a quest for the sublime. Now, I can add, of course, that the story is thrust into motion by the question, what do you do if your 13-year-old daughter comes home and she is pregnant, and not only pregnant, but she wants to keep the baby? It is an impossible dilemma. For many, a lose-lose proposition, but it does throw into relief some of the moral dimension of what it means to live by one's convictions.
It also throws things into a bit of a state of movement, too, in that in many different stages in the movie, you have different actors and actresses portraying Aviva, who's basically the protagonist of the film.
Yes, there are 8 actors who play this one character. When I made Welcome to the Dollhouse, I remember all sorts of people coming up to me. It could be a beautiful model or a heavy-set construction worker, and it didn't matter. They'd all say the same thing. They'd say, that was me. I was Dawn Wiener. And so what I've done here is I say, okay, well, I can let all of you, in some sense, be this young girl, not Dawn Wiener, but her cousin. While there are 8 actors, in a sense, any one of us could play an episode in this young girl's life. When you cast, of course, one actor to one character, you approach the universality of experience by getting at it through this kind of particularity. And I, in a sense, am looking at things through the other end of the telescope. Flipping things so that you get at this universality of experience from opposing a vantage point. I know that, of course, when the audience watches the movie, at first they will be disoriented. Is the girl black? Is she Latino? Is she a redhead, etc.? But at a certain point, it kicks in, and audiences are smart, and they understand, I see, it's multiple performers, but one character. And the hope is that in some sense at the end, the cumulative effect of all of these different performers is greater than had it been but one.
And you trigger that universality you're talking about, that relationship to Dawn Wiener, by announcing that Dawn Wiener is dead at the beginning of the movie.
Well, although in truth I didn't want her to die. I had many plans for her. I begged the actress Heather Matarazzo, who played her in Welcome to the Dollhouse, to reprise this role for storytelling and again for this movie. And I pleaded with her. I begged her, but she refused me. She said she never wanted to play this character ever again. So I had to accept this reality. And Welcome to the Dollhouse is referenced. It's a kind of launching pad for this movie, but it serves as a kind of demarcation. That was then. That was that kind of a movie, going off in that kind of a direction. And here we have a very different animal going off in a very different direction with very different aims.
It's The Treatment, I guess, is writer-director Todd Solondz. His new movie is Palindromes. I guess what so often fascinates me about your movies is the way you separate love and sex and then bring them together. I can't think of any filmmaker who toys with those two concepts and making sex both an emotional and physical thing, pulling them apart and bringing them together as much as you do.
Well, thank you. I think that sex is interesting and engaging in movies insofar as it is revelatory about human nature, about the dramatic nature of one's state of being at the moment. It is a way of exploring it, getting at character, essentially. Sex being the most intimate of all acts.
It's rarely, if ever, a celebratory in your movies.
Celebratory. Well, I guess the problem is if sex is celebratory, as indeed it may be, often it is of little dramatic interest. If everyone's all happy, if everything is all working out just splendid, then I don't have much incentive to portray it because what's the point? Everything is working out. It's only when there are problems, when there are troubles, that I become engaged emotionally.
I say that about sex because in your movies, the act of sex or even the desire for sex almost always sets things into motion and leads to complications. And it feels more to me like the stuff of literature than film.
I can only say that it is a device like any other that is used to touch people in the audience too. In some sense, the message, when people ask me, what is the message of my movies? Of course, I have no message beyond the one that I could apply to all of the films, and in a sense, all films that engage me, which is you are not alone.
You use sex to incite rather than to excite.
Well, that's true. If you think that the movie is going to provide a certain kind of a kick, you will be disappointed. It can be revelatory, and it can be moving, and it can be funny as well, all at the same time. That the humor and the pathos inextricably entwines in my work. I think is perhaps no more keenly experienced than in these moments of intimacy.
Certainly in Palindromes, too, where, that's, and I'm glad you used that word intimacy, because there is in so many of the characters, even we see in the opening scene between Aviva and her mother, there's kind of an ache for intimacy, and people want it so desperately. They don't seem to be able to listen to the person they're speaking to.
It's a driving need for many of my characters, the need to connect, the possibility of connection. At the end of this film, the protagonist, the girl, is having sex with a teenager, a second actor playing Judah. And clearly he is having sex. It's something of a struggle with him, in fact. And he is engaged very much in the sexual act. But she, on the other hand, and there's a kind of montage that's taking place as the sex progresses with different girls playing this one character. Her mind is beyond sex. There's something in some sense of transcending sex that in some sense she feels she's going to commune with this sense of the exquisite, which is for her to be a mom, which she believes will happen, and that her dream, her ultimate imperative in life is going to be fulfilled. Now, it may, of course, be fulfilled, but in ways maybe that may not be biological. But maybe she'll become a Mama Sunshine, in fact, in the end.
Now, let's talk about that, too, because this really is, it's certainly been a comparison to Night of the Hunter, but I feel like it gets back to the original material of that, and just moving from one family to another, or just trying to find the kind of an idealized family, and the way you sort of deal with her going from being with her mother to this family that may be, in fact, the type she has because she won't be a biological mother, is really a way of sort of dealing with people's perceptions of what family is and the way family often is portrayed in the movies.
Yes, well, there is often a certain kind of arrogance almost, I think, that many families, in fact, may have about their way being the right way, their way being the only way or the best way. I mean, this is a sort of a young girl who floats between secular, liberal, a Jewish family, and a conservative Christian family from the heartland, between the pro-choice that gives no choice and the pro-life that kills. And suspended between these two worlds, she does find a kind of love. But it's all very tricky. And as you know, the movie's all fraught with ambiguity. So when she arrives at the Sunshine House out in the conservative Christian heartlands, there is a satirical thrust, and there is a great deal of frivolity, but there is an underlying pathos and poignancy to all of this. When she sees all the children arrayed around the breakfast table, any one of them could have been her child. Any one of them could have been that child that her mother had warned her might become brain damaged or blind or missing a limb. And there they all are. So there's a kind of terrible poignancy that underlines all of the levity that we first see at that breakfast table. When we see this, there's a group of children, the Sunshine Singers. They form a musical singing group, and when they perform, I was very moved by their performance as they sing and they dance. With great pride and joy, with profound delight, they perform.
And that sense of the transcendent you're talking about that she's looking for in the sexual act, they find in that very act, it seems, of just performing together.
Well, it's a beautiful thing, and yet at the same time, if you step back, you say, "Oh my God, what are they singing?" And there's the rub. There's a kind of friction. There's a kind of friction of these two opposing impulses at work that is, I think, very emblematic of the dynamic in which I operate. So that as much as we may be moved in this way, we also may be horrified. That audiences then may say, "Oh, should I laugh? Should I not laugh? Or if I'm laughing, what am I laughing at?" There are no signposts, and yet this is all part of the charge, I think, of what engages me as a filmmaker.
I guess as you talk about this, too, I realize one of the reasons I bring up literature is that the way you pace your films seems to me the intent is to give audiences time to sort of take things in and to not rush them towards something, which is what filmmakers often do. But in a way, we get a chance to, when something's on the page, take our time and sort of go over it and try to figure out what it means to us.
Well, yes, well, particularly when I'm dealing with very delicate subject matter here, very volatile subject matter. So the modus operandi is very much one of restraints. Of I don't want to push things. Things will happen and come of their own time. I don't want to force and overemphasize what I know is already going to be very loaded and charged to begin with.
But by virtue of doing that, though, it really does make the moment sort of linger. And so we can take in all these different sorts of, these different kinds of emotional impacts that the scenes have, especially a scene like you just described.
That's the ideal, is that all of this will resonate off each other and build in ways that one can be fully conscious of as one is experiencing the movie as it plays along.
It's The Treatment. My guest is writer-director Todd Solondz. His new movie is Palindromes. We'll be back after a break.
You're listening to The Treatment with Elvis Mitchell from the studios of KCRW Santa Monica.
Welcome back. It's The Treatment. My guest is writer-director Todd Solondz. His newest movie is Palindromes. There are a number of questions, or you got the same question almost repeatedly from people, and you must almost now flinch when you know it's coming.
Which question are you talking about?
Certainly the questions about the politics of the movie. What are the politics? What are we supposed to... Definitely.
The thing is that the movie is operates in a way that is certainly out to poke and prod and provoke in ways that are meaningful. To get an audience to reassess, to reevaluate some of the preconceptions and myths by which we live. You take Ellen Barkin's character. I think she's a good woman, of progressive leaning. Certainly, if you gave her the form, she would check off anti-war, pro-gun control, pro-gay rights, etc. But then reality hits, and everything goes topsy-turvy.
But that's the thing about so many of your movies, that what is often abstractions for us, maybe even in the most tabloid sense, are things that hit these families, child molestation, all kinds of sort of emotional degradation and pain. And now these are things that people sort of think that they have the answers to, talking about them, both sides, until they actually take aim and hit somebody's home.
Well, I think some may be very quick to say in a sort of knee-jerk fashion, say, wait, are you saying you're not pro-choice, or you're saying you're not pro-life, or something? The movie is it's a little testy, I think, the way audiences may respond. But I certainly do bridle at any sense of complacency, never mind smugness. I mean, we have to be aware of how much defined we are by our prejudices and biases in ways that we cannot be fully conscious of. And I try to tap into that. I don't like to say that although I wonder that anyone even wonders where I stand on any of this, but I don't like to actually make the announcement, say I'm pro-choice, because if I say I'm pro-choice, first of all, no one who's pro-life will come see the movie. But then secondly, if I say I'm pro-choice, then the audience, they'll say, it's all right, I can enjoy it. He's pro-choice. But I don't want them to relax in that way. I want to push and poke and prod and so forth, to get one to have to re-examine some of one's assumptions. I certainly will say I'm anti-choice, choice, philosophically speaking, if that's something that even really exists.
It's The Treatment. My guest is Todd Solondz. His new movie is Palindromes. So much in your films, I think, about the way you use interiors, that people often seem to be trapped when they're inside. Especially we see the mobile home where the Sunshine family lives. It's kind of like, in fact, a really kind of almost horrifically claustrophobic place where the lights are a little too bright, and we have a sense of there being 4 walls instead of 3 the way they generally are in movies. And I don't see people talking about that or writing about that very much, or dealing with you in the way you use space to sort of define how your characters react.
I could argue with you there, Elvis, and say that if you were a conservative Christian and you were looking at that same home, you would look at it, of course, in a very, very different way. That you wouldn't see it as claustrophobic. You'd see it as sort of this ideal, airy, white, bright, Disney-esque kind of a home. It's almost, I chose a home that looked as if God had just planted it there, right in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of, on top of a grassy knoll.
But you know what I mean? There's a certain kind of reaction that people have, and again, this gets towards the polarity that you're talking about when they see mobile homes, especially in movies. When you see a mobile home, it basically gives us a message about the people living in it right away, and you chose to not do that.
Well, the thing that, as many liberals, in fact, will laugh, of course, at some of the frivolity and satire that takes place, but this is, what she's created, what one has to acknowledge is really a kind of paradise, that there is no higher virtue than to do what this woman does, to take in the abandoned, the discarded, the unwanted children, and provide a kind of sanctuary of love and affection. For all that we may want to go and attack and deride and mock, that ultimately her goodness has to win out in that sense.
But I am affected by the way people inhabit the spaces in your movie, the way homes mean so much. And it's not just a kind of an environment that sort of bespeaks a movie home where it looks like a set designer put everything there, but that you also try to create, getting back to that question of intimacy earlier, a sense of a kind of an intimacy that the characters bring to their spaces.
Well, yes. I mean, these worlds that I put together are reflective of the needs and the absences in these characters' lives, and in some sense has to be reflective and feed into all of that. Everything has to serve a function dramatically. There's nothing that in that sense is accidental. There was a Costco aesthetic at work at the Sunshine House. I wanted a home that did look like, in some sense, a perfect home that many people would dream to be able to afford. This large, to others faceless and banal, but to others clean and comforting. As I say, it was placed down by the hand of God.
I guess I end up thinking too, though, about Viva's room and how it's this sort of perfect upper middle class place too that, speaks to something that she doesn't really respond to anymore. I mean, she has, in some philosophical, spiritual way, bigger goals in mind for herself than that room would lead us to believe.
Well, certainly, I don't know that having the goal at 13 years old to wanting to have babies is a dangerous goal. And certainly, the terrible irony, of course, is that this is a room, of course, that could so easily serve for that of a newborn. That it is both this girl that is now becoming a woman, and at the same time will not let go of the dream of having a child.
I guess I noticed too a lot in the movies that so much of the movies sort of revolve around kids who are students or the age of students, or basically still in school, and it does make me wonder why that age for you, or that age grouping, is such a compelling place for drama.
Certainly, that point of convergence between childhood and adolescence, it throws so much of human character into relief. Kindness and savagery both are in full display, and it's before the tools of subterfuge and camouflage are put into place as one gets older. And they are interesting insofar as they are revelatory about who we are as adults. I think that what's maybe different here is that I suppose I just don't look at children so much as other. To me, they are just people. They are characters. I don't say that's a child character. I say it's a character. And so I don't make that kind of separation, perhaps. People say, oh, you must love children. Well, it depends on the child. I look at them as characters and treat them as such.
But I guess maybe less so here, that sort of socialization that being school age forces is so integral to what you do as a writer.
I can't really account for this. I don't have answers as what brings me, what compels me to pursue these young characters. I don't know the answer. Look, I've been writing since I'm reading, and what makes me put pen to paper is a great mystery. The process of filmmaking, it is one very much of discovery, of self-discovery at that. I imagine after writing a script that I think I know what I've wrought. I think I know what I've got there. But of course, once I start shooting, when the actors and locations come into place, the meaning shifts, and I have a new sense of what I'm after. So that in a sense, I'm not a director so much as a pursuer. And then in the cutting room, of course, as I cut away and distill and find the final form, it takes on yet another meaning. And even once it's finished, I'm still connecting certain dots, so that when people ask me, did the film turn out the way you imagined it would, I always have to say no, it never does. But if I'm lucky, it turns out better.
It's the treatment. My guest is writer-director Todd Solondz. His new movie is Palindromes. But since you mentioned this, I guess I'm sort of fascinated by the fact that whatever sort of punishment the kids have to endure, there is still, I don't know if I want to use the word enthusiasm, but they still feel this need to go on. Whereas the line, once they cross into adulthood, there's this almost kind of terrible loneliness in them.
You might be right. I don't know. I think it depends on a character by character basis. Certainly, the protagonist of this movie, even if biologically she won't have children, I am taken with the beauty of her hope that she will fulfill her destiny as she sees it in some very tangible, real way. So I do feel a great deal of hope for her. And less so for certain other characters. I don't know if it's a clean division between those who are adults and those who are children. Some of them certainly I am hopeful for, that they will find a kind of a communion, a kind of connection. Some do and some don't.
I guess, though, hearing you use the word hopeful, because it has so many permutations in your movies, and sometimes in the case of a character like Aviva, we can clearly see how hopeful she is, that hope really is what's pushing her forward. It feels like, in some respects, even though she's lost something that will define her life, the thing she wants the most, that there's kind of a benevolent fate behind her, and maybe she's been spared something by not having a child at that age.
That's up for grabs there. I certainly, it's not something I of course could encourage of any 13-year-old. And yet, of course, one has to question, did her mother do the right thing?
I guess, though, in talking about this, and again, just dealing with the sexuality, you said in some of the interviews that it would be far more abhorrent to have a kid in a Gap commercial or something like that. And what that feels like to me is this is a movie that says that there are consequences of sex and the kind of sexuality that's often kind of forced on children at too early an age.
Well, for all the talk that's talked, who's on poverty? It's children, mostly children, and who's abused? It's mostly children, not the elderly. It is always the children. They are, in some sense, the detritus of society for all the talk that's talked. And it is, of course, of unspeakable tragic dimensions. And so it's hard not to be responsive to that reality.
But did you feel, too, in the making of the movie that this constant sort of selling of sex as a commodity even for young children or younger children, children of the age of thinking about sex is kind of inappropriate, did that in some way fire you to do this?
Anytime, whether it's sex as a modification or whether the feeding into this I don't want to get too sociological about this, but there is so much that is sold to us as children, that is, of course, obscene and damaging, I think, to the psyche in ways that it's hard to even assess fully. But so, yes, I am responsive to the realities of living in the capital of capitalism.
Well, not on public radio, you're not. Thanks for doing this, Todd.
Thank you.
My guest is Todd Solondz. His wonderful new movie is Palindromes. Our technical director and editor at KCRW in Santa Monica is Bob Carlson, with technical assistance at Argo Network from Paul Ruest. The producer is Mary Holdridge. I'm Elvis Mitchell. It's The Treatment.
An audio archive of this and other programs can be found at KCRW.com. For questions and comments about The Treatment, please email us at thetreatment@kcrw.com. The Treatment is produced and distributed by KCRW Santa Monica.